Good morning. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. How's your attitude this morning? Neville Goddard, in his book, The Power of Awareness, talks about attitude and experiments. There's been all kinds of research and experiments done that prove that what you see when you look at something depends not so much on what is there as on the assumption you make when you look. Since what we believe to be the real physical world is actually only an assumptive world, it's not surprising that these experiments prove that what appears to be solid reality is actually the result of expectations or assumptions. Your assumptions determine not only what you see, but also what you do, for your assumptions govern all your conscious and subconscious movements toward the fulfillment of themselves. What you expect, you receive. What you assume to be true becomes true for you. If you assume the world is a scary, fearful place, and you go around looking for danger and looking for everything that's going wrong, you're going to find it. If you assume the state of being safe and protected and loved, the world is a beautiful place. That's what it shows you. That's what you see. That's what you believe. That's how your world becomes for you. Over a century ago, this truth was stated by Emerson as the world was plastic and fluid in the hands of God, so it is ever to so much of his attributes as we bring to it. To ignorance and sin, it is flint. They adapt themselves to it as they may, but in proportion as a man has anything in him divine, the firmament flows before him and takes his signet and form. What you assume, your assumption, is the hand of God molding the firmament into the image of that which you assume. The assumption of the wish fulfilled is the high tide which lifts you easily off the bar of the senses where you have so long lain stranded. It lifts the mind into prophecy in the full right sense of the word. And if you have that controlled imagination and absorbed attention, which is possible to attain, you may be sure that all your assumption implies will come to pass. Think about that. Get yourself settled in. Put away distractions. Focus on your breathing. Settle your body down. Open up your intuitive factor. Open up your creativity by calming down, taking a deep breath in, and allowing yourself to relax, to just be, to be in the state of being loved, protected, calm. Focusing your attention on who you really are, part of the divine, a spark of divine, infinite intelligence residing in a physical body, being here in this time and space, in this physical three-dimensional world to experience all that life has to offer. How's your attitude? Are you looking forward to more love, more joy, more experiences? Or are you afraid? Allow that infinite power to come into your mind and into your body and to experience, what do you really want? Neville Goddard is a powerful writer, and he says, when William Blake wrote, "What seems to be is to those to whom it seems to be," he was only repeating the eternal truth. There is nothing unclean of itself, but to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. Because there is nothing unclean of itself or clean of itself, you should assume the best and think only of that which is lovely and of good report. It is not superior insight, but ignorance of this law of assumption, if you read into the greatness of men some littleness with which you may be familiar, or into some situation or circumstance an unfavorable conviction. Your particular relationship to another influences your assumption with respect to that other and makes you see in him that which you do see. If you can change your opinion of another, then what you now believe of him cannot be absolutely true, but it's only relatively true. Here's an interesting case study, an actual story illustrating how the law of assumption works. And there was a costume designer who went to Neville Goddard. She was having difficulties working with a prominent theatrical producer. Now, keep in mind, this story was written many years ago. I believe it was in the 1950s, maybe earlier than that. So Neville Goddard tells the story. One day, a costume designer described to me her difficulties in working with a prominent theatrical producer. She was convinced that he unjustly criticized and rejected her best work, and that often he was deliberately rude and unfair to her. Upon hearing her story, I explained that if she found him rude and unfair, it was a sure sign that she herself was wanting. It was not the producer, but herself that was in need of a new attitude. I told her that the power of the law of assumption and its practical application could be discovered only through experience, and that only by assuming that the situation was already what she wanted it to be, could she prove that she could bring about the change desired. Her employer was merely bearing witness, telling her by his behavior what her concept of him was. Neville Goddard said, I suggested that it was quite probable that she was carrying on conversations with him in her mind, which were filled with criticism and recriminations. There was no doubt but that she was mentally arguing with the producer, for others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. I asked her if it was not true that she talked to him mentally, and if so, what those conversations were like. She confessed that every morning on her way to the theater, in her mind, she told him just what she thought of him in a way that she would never have dared to address him in person. The intensity and force of her mental arguments with him automatically established his behavior towards her. She began to realize that all of us carry on mental conversations, but unfortunately, on most occasions, these conversations are argumentative. that we have only to observe the passerby on the street to prove this assertion, that so many people are mentally engrossed in conversation and few appear to be happy about it. But the very intensity of their feeling must lead them quickly to the unpleasant incident that they themselves have mentally created and now must encounter. That's the law of attraction at work. When the costume designer realized what she had been doing, she agreed to change her attitude and to live this law faithfully by assuming that her job was highly satisfactory and her relationship with her producer was a very happy one. To do this, she agreed that before going to sleep at night and on her way to work in the morning and at other intervals during the day, she would imagine that the theatrical producer had congratulated her on her fine designs, and that she in turn had thanked him for his praise and kindness. To her great delight, she soon discovered for herself that her own attitude was the cause of all that befell her. The behavior of her employer miraculously reversed itself, his attitude echoing as it had always done that which she had assumed now reflected her changed concept of him. What she did was by the power of her imagination. Her persistent assumption influenced his behavior and determined his attitude toward her. That is the law of cause and effect, the law of attraction at work. What you put out returns to you faithfully. If you are hating another person, if you are wishing bad happening to someone else, if you're looking at all the craziness, the wars, the injustices, the poverty, and getting emotionally involved in what's going on outside of you, and you're feeling that deep inside of you, you can't hide it. When you're thinking and feeling negatively, you attract more of that. You notice all the bad. You notice all the hatred. You notice the poverty. You feel it. You align with it, and that becomes your experience. Neville Goddard says, with the passport of desire and on the wings of a controlled imagination, the costume designer traveled into the future of her own predetermined experience. Thus we see it not facts, but that which we create in our imagination which shapes our lives. For most of the conflicts of the day are due to the want of a little imagination to cast the beam out of our own eye. It is the exact and literal minded who live in a fictitious world. As this costume designer, by her controlled imagination, started the subtle change in her employer's mind, so can we, by the control of our imagination and wisely directed feeling, solve our problems. By the intensity of her imagination and feeling, the designer cast a kind of enchantment on her producer's mind and caused him to think that his generous praise originated with him. Often our most elaborate and original thoughts are determined by another. William Butler Yeats said, "We should never be certain that it is not some woman treading in the winepress who began that subtle change in men's mind, or that the passion did not begin in the mind of some shepherd boy, lighting up his eyes for a moment before it ran upon its way." Neville Goddard then goes on to talk about renunciation. There is no coal of character so dead that it will not glow and flame if but slightly turned. Resist not evil. Whosoever shall smite thee on their right cheek, turn to him the other also. There is a difference between resisting evil and renouncing it. When you resist evil, you give it your attention. You continue to make it real. When you renounce evil, you take your attention from it and give your attention to what you want. My mentor, Bob Proctor, used to say, what you resist persists. When you try and push away the idea that I'm not going to focus on debt, I'm not going to focus on poverty, I know that I'm poor, I'm afraid, I'm worried. I'm going to ignore that and focus on what I want. When you try and push it away, you actually add fuel to the fire. You build it up. You add energy to it. And so even though you say that's what I don't want, that becomes more in your experience. It becomes bigger. It becomes your life because you're focused on not having wealth, not being healthy, not being loved. The universe doesn't hear, I don't want that. It just feels your energy and reflects back to you what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're doing about it. When you renounce evil, you take attention from it and give your attention to what you want. Now is the time to control your imagination and give beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Neville Goddard says, you give beauty for ashes when you concentrate your attention on things as you would like them to be, rather than on things as they are. Forget about what's going wrong. Focus your energy on how you want it to be, what you want to be feeling, what you would prefer. What would it be like to be loved and cherished and respected? How would you be feeling if you didn't have to worry about debt? You had enough money to do what you want, when you want, enjoying your life and looking for ways to help other people. Neville says, you give joy for mourning when you maintain a joyous attitude regardless of unfavorable circumstances. You give praise for the spirit of heaviness when you maintain a confident attitude instead of succumbing to despondency. In this quote, the Bible uses the word tree as a synonym for man. You become a tree of righteousness when the above mental states are a permanent part of your consciousness. You are a planting of the Lord when all your thoughts are true thoughts. He is I am, as described in the first chapter. I am consciousness. I am that I am. I am is glorified when your highest concept of yourself is manifested. When you have discovered your own controlled imagination to be your savior, your attitude will be completely altered without any diminution of religious feeling. And you will say of your controlled imagination, behold this vine, I found it a wild tree, whose wanton strength had swollen into irregular twigs. But I pruned the plant, and it grew temperate in its vain expense of useless leaves, and nodded, as you see, into these clean, full clusters to repay the hand that wisely wounded it. He's talking about pruning your imagination like you prune a dead vine or tree. By vine is meant your imagination, in which its uncontrolled state expends its energy in useless or destructive thoughts and feelings. But you, just as the vine is pruned by cutting away its useless branches and roots, you prune your imagination by withdrawing your attention from all unlovely and destructive ideas and concentrating on the ideal you wish to attain. That's not easy. It takes practice. It takes focusing your attention. It takes relaxing and putting yourself in that state of being that you truly desire. The happier, more noble life you will experience will be the result of wisely pruning your own imagination. Neville says, yes, be pruned of all unlovely thoughts and feelings, that you may think truly, and thy thoughts shall the world's famine feed. Speak truly, and each word of thine shall be a fruitful seed. Live truly, and thy life shall be a great and noble creed. It is not nobler to be poor, to give all your money to a cause. How much more can you do for the world when you have more wealth to do more for the people you love, more for your charities, more for yourself? Poverty doesn't lift up other people in poverty. It is noble to become wealthy, and in doing so, how much more can you contribute to the world? How much more can you give when you are healthy and happy? When you lift yourself up and you radiate goodness and love, you affect all of those around you. When you feel healthy, wealthy, wise, wonderful, you radiate that energy. You help more people. You lift up others around you. When you feel faithful, loving, happy, when you think the best of everyone around you, you experience that. Not only do others think the best of you, but you contribute more to the world. You lift up other people. And in doing that, you are lifted to a higher level. The energy that you are emanating into the world, your invisible thoughts, your imagination, what you think about, you bring about. There's all sorts of research and experiments that prove when you look at what you look at depends not so much on what is there as on the assumption you make when you look. When you assume this is terrible, this is bad, the world is going to hell. No, it is clearing a space for more good to come about. The old must die in order for a new world, a new vision, a new way of living to come about. Don't hang on to how things should be or have to be or used to be. The past is gone. Prepare yourself for what you do want. Imagine how wonderful the world is. What is it like to be living a wonderful life? What would it look like? What would it feel like? How would people be treating each other? How would you be living your life? There's something deep inside of you that you truly desire. Take the time to write about it as if it's already done. Get into that feeling. Allow the energy of your body to be that loving, kind, wonderful, wealthy, happy, respected person who is filled with wonderful ideas, and you live your life with ease and flow. And as you do this, you emanate a higher version of yourself. You emanate the energy of already being calm, already being loved, already being at ease, already being wealthy enough to do what you want when you want with no restrictions, no worries. What do you really want? I want you to not only write about it as if it's here, it's already done, but that you feel that way. You're already there. How do you feel now that you are? You know that you are a divine spark of God energy. Allow that to radiate from you and attract to you all the people, all the resources, all the conditions necessary to bring your dream into physical reality. Imagine it, assume it, expect it, and it becomes your way of life. Create a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me in this morning mindfulness practice. Protect your attitude. Go out and show the world what a loving, caring person you are. And I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 7. Thank you.